with Jamar Chase out for week 8 and potentially out for the next month to month and a half, how do you think his absence is going to impact the Bengals for the foreseeable future?
I think it's going to be huge, and I'm not saying huge to where the Bengals are going to lose, but you have to remember in the defensive scheme that you place as a coordinator, you plan to limit or take away options from specific players. Jamar Chase is already not even 2 years into the league, and he pretty much demands a double team anytime he lines up one on one, especially in man coverage. Now you have a less receiver to worry about. And I'm not saying that Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins aren't good targets, but let's be honest. When you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd lined up at the same time, you can't double somebody because someone's going to be wide open. That's why they're able to have the games that they are. Jamar may not have 150 yards every game, but if he were to have 80 something yards, but T. Higgins has a buck 30, Tyler Boyd has 100, and then of course, Hayden Hurst goes for 60. That is why the team is as successful as it is, because they have to pick their poison. So when you take away a weapon for a quarterback as talented as Joe Burrow, I think that they're going to slightly struggle because at the end of the day, they are going to miss one of their best receivers, but they have enough talent around them to make it work, at least until he gets back. I know that I've talked about, especially in our last short and TikTok, that they have a favorable schedule coming up with the Browns, the Steelers, the Titans, and if I'm not mistaken, it's also against the Panthers. They can make it work while he's gone. Kyle, what's the diagnosis? Is he out for a month, 2 months? Like I saw that he was out, but I didn't get to see how long.
Well, he's out for week 8. That's already been reported. So now it's going to be the question of whether or not that he's put on IR. So from what I've read from Adam Schefter and just kind of the reports surrounding Jamar Chase with this hip issue, he could potentially be out 4 to 6 weeks. And this has apparently been an issue that he's been dealing with since week 6 when they played the New Orleans Saints on the road. So he's been playing through this, I'd say probably the last week or so. And even like looking back to the game that they had last weekend against the Falcons, I mean, he was extremely effective. But I guarantee you that one touchdown pass that he had where he kind of caught it along the right sideline, but he landed on his hip. I wonder if that kind of exacerbated
Aggravated
that,
it, yeah.
yeah, that issue that he had already had in his hip. But yeah, it's really going to come down to whether he's going to go on IR or not. So all I know is that he's out for week 8. They've already ruled him out for that. But there's a very good chance that he could miss several more weeks depending on how the recovery process goes. But I'll let it go back to you.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I didn't really have much to say outside of that because, like I said, when you lose a weapon, it makes your offense a little bit more vulnerable. Obviously, they may want to lean on Joe Mixon just a little bit more just because he is a very versatile running back. And Hayden Hurst has, of course, shown that he can be reliable when his teammates aren't getting separation and they aren't open. But I think the Bengals will be fine. Again, favorable schedule of him missing 4 to 6 weeks. The next 4 weeks are favorable matchups for him, or should I say for them. So they could end up coming out of this 3-1. In my opinion, they should be 4-0. So if he were to come back in the later half of that injury, in terms of if he were to hit the 5-6 week mark, I think that is when the schedule will start to get just a little bit tougher because they have some harder opponents at that point. But I do believe that the Bengals will be fine. He will be missed, but I think that Joe Burrow is a good enough quarterback to make up for it, and I think they're talented enough on offense to make sure that they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think they're going to make adjustments. I mean, look, teams go through a bunch of injuries every single year, and you have to be able to adjust, and it is next man up in the NFL. And that's going to be kind of put to the test, I think, when it comes to the Bengals this upcoming weekend, when they go up against, actually, I take that back. They played the Monday night game against the Browns.
Yeah,
So,
against the Browns.
so this will actually probably be a good time to be able to kind of test some different formations, see who's going to be put into certain spots and see who can excel and who maybe doesn't necessarily play up to snuff. But just to kind of kick it to how I think it's going to impact the Bengals, I think it's going to be minimal. I don't think this is going to have a potential to be really significant in a negative fashion for the Bengals here. And let's face it, when you look at Joe Burrow specifically, obviously, like, Jamar Chase is his guy. I mean, they were boys back at LSU, and they've been able to maintain the connection as they've transitioned both into the NFL. And obviously, his presence is going to be missed just because, I mean, based off of that game against the Falcons last week, I mean, they were running and gunning, and it's really one of the first few times that we've seen the Bengals really get into a rhythm offensively, just because at the beginning of the year, this team was struggling. Joe Burrow was getting sacked. They were turning the ball over. They had a difficulty scoring points, but they've seemed to finally rectify those issues offensively. And now this kind of looks like the team that we kind of expected coming into the year. And, when it comes to Jamar Chase not being in the fold, I definitely expect that Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon are going to be huge points of emphasis here. These guys are going to have to essentially carry the offense alongside with Joe to keep this team viable. And I wouldn't be surprised that if the Bengals defense is able to maintain the performances that they've had the last couple of weeks, I think that's going to be, I guess, a positive element for them moving forward. But I would say, just as like just a minor point here, don't take this out of context. I think there's going to be a little bit of added pressure on Joe's back, knowing that his number one target's not going to be there. So Joe's going to have to elevate his game. He's going to have to get more comfortable with obviously throwing to guys like Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, which I don't think is going to be that big of an issue. It's just, moving guys around and putting them in different slots in the offense. But overall, like you said, Kev, they've got a pretty favorable schedule here for the next month. And if Jamar's held out for a month, so be it. If he goes on IR, he's at least going to miss 4 weeks minimum. That just comes to the territory of being on IR. And that would mean if he were to come off on IR 4 weeks down the road, he'd be ready to go in the first week of December against the Chiefs. And that, to me, is one of the biggest games that they're going to have of the entire year. So I don't think this is necessarily the worst case scenario for the Bengals. Obviously, it's going to sting just a little bit early on, but I think they'll be able to get past it. But if they get him back for that battle against the Chiefs, which is going to be a rematch of the AFC Championship game, that would be huge. And I think that he would actually provide a huge spark for the Bengals going into that matchup against KC, because they're going to need him if he's available. Because let's face it, the Chiefs are one of the best teams in the NFL this year. They've shown it game in and game out. And the Bengals need all the personnel that they need. It's going to be all hands on deck going up against the Chiefs in that first week of December, because that game is going to be lit, to put it mildly. It's probably going to be one of the games of the year, to be quite honest with you. But overall, I think the Bengals will be fine. His absence will be missed, but I think that they can work through it. That's just how I see it.